This video is proudly sponsored by Gamersgate. Download games anytime, anywhere. Visit Gamersgate.com.
I love first-person shooters. Love them. Some of my favorite games of all time are shooters. The Half-Life and Dark Forces series, Far Cry, BioShock, Stalker, Shadows of Chernobyl, Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, Call of Duty's 1, its expansion, and 2, Fear, Metro 2033, Unreal Tournament, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, Battlefield 2142, and yeah, I've deviously lied about my usage of prox mines in the bathroom, probably while using Oddjob. Every year since its release, I rewatch HBO's series Band of Brothers. I'm not a gigantic fan of history, I'm not a collector of World War II memorabilia. In fact, my grasp on American history is tenuous at best. But I do have a respect for it, and more importantly, I have a respect for how some people have devoted their lives to changing humanity, whether that change was intentional or unintentional. But every year I watch this series not expecting to see how it has changed, but rather to see how my perspective has changed. This year, after I watched Band of Brothers, a thought kept resurfacing. Band of Brothers is an awesome first-person shooter. Now, I know that statement is absolutely absurd, and if you want to get semi-technical about it, Call of Duty United Offensive, and Call of Duty 2 are essentially Band of Brothers the video game, even using a good number of the actors from the show. But it's the qualities of the show Band of Brothers that I look for in a first-person shooter. Band of Brothers is an amazing story of non-fiction. It has a cast of memorable characters, and what's interesting is, it successfully transmits the emotions of the characters onto the viewer. While watching the show, I empathetically feel cold in the snows of Bastogne. I worry about ammunition count and getting shot during machine gun barrages. I am envious of the friendships they share in the harshest of environments. Watching Band of Brothers makes me feel like I'm taking part in something greater than myself, and it does it all while I'm sitting on my couch, probably slouching, with a pile of soda and snacks packing enough calories for me to live off of for weeks. It does it all passively. Video games, the worlds without restrictions, the ones with which I am directly interacting, the place where the actors are speaking directly to me, where the tragic and the awesome events are happening to me, should strive to achieve the level of immersion that Band of Brothers radiates. But since Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, modern military shooters have drifted further and further away from achieving any of those goals. And as every year goes by, they've been growing more and more stale in my eyes. Plenty don't agree with me, some even within the ElderGeek.com staff, and it's their right to. But I decided to whip up this video to help illustrate my point of view. If by the end you don't agree with me, or at the very least, see my point of view, then you may go along your merry way to spend your money how you choose. But know that I miss what shooters used to be, and I fear that they're being pushed in the wrong direction by the spending habits of gamers who happily throw their money at glorified map packs. A good shooter should have at least one of these traits. Better shooters have more. Game mechanics, based on skill. A fear of death or dying, or at the very least losing at the hands of the enemy. A cast of memorable characters. A story or set of events that make the player feel like they're taking part in something larger than themselves. Allows the player to experience something new, unique, or important. Most of the games that I've listed earlier fulfill at least one of these basic characteristics, though admittedly, less and less of them are based in skill like classic arcade games of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Doom, Unreal Tournament, and Turok might not have the most memorable characters or the best stories, but it was their basis in skill that made them stand the test of time. While it has made shooters more cinematic, regenerating health has caused more harm than good to the shooter genre. I am not against the use of regenerating health if used correctly, but most modern military shooters don't use it correctly. Games like Stalker, Dark Forces, Half-Life, Doom, and even the original Call of Duty all present the player with a real chance of losing, and therefore when you complete the game, the victory is all the sweeter. Adding in feelings of isolation and horror make games like Stalker particularly potent. Tossing in real-life scenarios make games like the original Call of Duty more memorable. In multiplayer scenarios, being dead up to 15 minutes from a single round make Mount and Blade Warband, Napoleonic Wars something absolutely special. But with most modern military shooters, you can take multiple rounds to the chest, limbs, and depending on the difficulty level, the head, and still continue to return fire against your enemies. And as long as you have a waist-high wall to hide behind, you can take a 5-second breather from the havoc and then dive right back into the fray as good as new. In multiplayer, there is rarely a fear of dying aside from ruining your kill-to-death ratio. Death means a respawn at full health a few seconds later. There is no fear of losing, so the joy of winning has been dulled significantly, and the need for skill has been tossed right out the window. Because of their performances and the roles they play, I can list the names of plenty of memorable characters from shooters off the top of my head. Not only that, I can probably tell you about their specific personalities and lives, and therefore, they add to the believability of a video game, making you feel like you're a part of their lives as well. Kyle Katarn and Jan Ors, Alex Vance, Atlas, Andrew Ryan, Paxton Fettel, Duke Nukem, Booker DeWitt, Elizabeth, Jack Carver, Max Payne, and Dominic Santiago. Hell, the player learns a good bit about the mute Gordon Freeman by the way other characters treat him. I racked my head trying to remember some characters from Call of Duty and Battlefield. The first two that came to mind were Price and Soap, both from the Call of Duty series. Aside from being devoted soldiers, I can't tell you a single thing about them, and I only remember their names because of their repeated appearances across multiple entries in the series. I can't regurgitate a single character from Battlefield. Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, Call of Duty, and Call of Duty 2 were awesome, and I'm not using that word in the classic Ninja Turtle denotation. I mean to say that they inspired awe, letting gamers fill the shoes of soldiers and vicariously witnessing a hell that was real on Earth. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare did a fair job of recreating that awe in a fictional war, though many gamers at the time, myself included, projected the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan as the inspiration for the story, and it hit home for us. The BioShock series places gamers in the final days of anti-utopian, self-sustaining cities complete with magic, political corruption, insanity, and polluted idealism. It walks them through a civilization that almost was, but shall be no more. Metro 2033 walks players through a post-apocalyptic Moscow where humanity struggles to survive against radiation and monsters by using self-made firearms and remnant weapons. For years, developers have started with a decent story and built their game around it, just like film, books, and movies. When that process is reversed, the end result feels hollow and completely one-dimensional. Many people refer to it as Michael Bayism. It's not immersive, it's distracting. The new popular way to develop shooters is to start with the action set pieces first, and then fabricate a story and characters to loosely tie one location to the other. Do I need to spell out how that is one of the worst things I've learned about modern gaming trends? How hasn't this scared hundreds of thousands of lifelong gamers like myself? I haven't found myself attached to a story from a Call of Duty game in a long time. The conflict in Battlefield 3 is generic good guys versus generic terrorist bad guys, and I don't think Battlefield 4 will be any different. Doom set players in a fight against hell itself in a first-person point of view. It hadn't been done before. The Dark Forces series let gamers experience the Star Wars galaxy from the point of view of a rebel turned Jedi Knight. It hadn't been done in a video game before. Turok Dinosaur Hunter pitted players against humans and dinosaurs alike on a realistic 3D fantasy battlefield. It hadn't been done before. Nearly every game I presented in my list of favorites put players into scenarios that were either new, unique, or in the case of the early Call of Duty series, important. But you know what we've been playing a lot of and been paying through the nose for, both monetarily and for their ill effects on gaming trends? Generic first-person military shooters with little or no story, vapid and forgetful characters that don't take much skill to play. Each one is shockingly similar to one another, with the only difference being updated graphics and some very, very slight gameplay tweaks. But what about the multiplayer, you may ask? I love playing multiplayer first-person shooters. Even with regenerating health, it can still be about skill rather than sheer determination. But are gamers flocking to what is best, or to what is newest? I'd love it if the correct answer was, what is best? But the answer is simply, what is newest. Every year, thousands of players leave the servers of one generic first-person shooter for the servers of the newest entry in the series, leaving behind dozens of perfectly usable maps and gameplay mechanics. I don't expect a story or memorable characters from a multiplayer shooter, but what I do expect is more support from the developers and the publishers post-launch. I want a near MMO level of moderation. Instead, what I get are servers infected by gamers playing with hacks, players who break the immersion by team killing, wasting team supplies, and generally only playing for their own kill-to-death ratio. And let's not forget the geek-on-geek hatred, the absolutely appalling rampant racism, sexism, and general ill behavior that give gamers everywhere a bad name. Other players break the immersion more often than a slightly unbalanced gun or map ever could. I've brought this issue up before, and people always offer the advice to join a clan and pay for private servers, but considering the amount of money I spent on a brand new first-person multiplayer shooter, I shouldn't have to get that kind of service. I realize that shooters are great mindless fun, but we have plenty of mindless shooters right now. It's time again for the medium to start developing the unforgettable stories, crafting the believable characters, putting the fear back into players, and giving us something unique once again. Personally, I'm done with military shooters until I see something worthwhile to go back to in the genre. But that game hasn't even been announced yet at the time of making this video. Now get off my lawn.